top 5 tight ends from last year. No real surprise. Travis Kelce at the top, George Kittle right behind him. Darren Waller, who was a huge breakout this past year. He's third. Zach Ertz 4. Mark Andrews is at number 5. Tight end, I think when you talk about the top 2 guys, I think they're pretty steady. The rest of it seems sort of volatile. So which one of those guys or all of those guys? I mean, do we replace most of the top 5, part of the top 5, none of the top 5? How does that happen this year?
Kelce and Kittle are not dropping out of the top 5 outside of injuries.
Right.
I feel like Andrews is a pretty good bet to be in the top 5 again.
Mm-hmm.
So Ertz with the presence of Dallas Goedert, with the additions they made through the draft, they drafted 3 wide receivers, including Jalen Reagor, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him dropping out of the top 5, just not very far.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to replace Ertz, it'd probably be with a guy like Hunter Henry, who will have a full season, we hope, as a very integral part of that Chargers offense, especially if it's Justin Herbert under center for any extended period of time, because that tight end is always a good security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like if Evan Ingram could, and I love Evan, if he can ever avoid injuries, he's got top 5 potential.
He does.
Higbee, I don't know. I'm really interested to see what the Rams do, because they ran so much 11 for, the first half of the season, and then they went so much 12 in the second half of the season. I don't know where they're going in terms of 2020 with their personnel formations, but Higbee's production over the last 4 or 5 weeks of last season is not sustainable over 16 games. So
right.
I mean, I could see Waller dropping out too. I don't think Gronkowski is going to be in the top 5, because I just don't feel like he's not the same guy. And this is probably the most talented offense he's maybe ever played in terms of the Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I mean, the other 2 tight ends would Brait and OJ Howard. So I don't know that Gronk would break up into there. So I'd say Henry, Ingram, maybe Higbee. We'll see. But if there's, and maybe we'll save this for a little bit later on the show, but there's a couple of guys that I feel like could really surprise, like Darren Waller really surprised us. We liked him in the preseason, but not as a top 5 guy.
Right.
There's a couple of guys I feel like could surprise.
Definitely about that. That boys and girls is called a tease.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for a little bit more. I will say this. I do think Darren Waller falls out of the top 5. I think partially because, I mean, obviously they add Henry Ruggs. And I still think Hunter Renfrow kind of lurking around there is a guy who maybe gobbles up a few more targets and hurts Waller's overall value a little bit. I mean, look, the Raiders knew in the offseason that they needed more pass catchers. I mean, they went out and drafted 3 receivers or 3 pass catchers that they could add to their offense. So they knew they needed to do something, because this offense just could not survive throwing the ball to Darren Waller as much as they did last year. So I could definitely see him fall out. I'm with you on Ertz possibly dropping a couple more spots, because the Eagles will try to spread it around. And look, last year, their wide receiver core was so banged up that they, look, Ertz is a very good player, but they also sort of had to funnel him targets out of necessity, because there just weren't guys healthy on the field to throw the football to. So if they can keep guys healthy, that will certainly impact Zach Ertz as well. So if those guys are out, you mentioned Evan Ingram as a guy who can come in. Hunter Henry is a guy who could come in. We'll see what happens with Tyler Higbee. I'm top 5 seems a little bit much for Hayden Hurst, but I'm very much in on him this year. Now that he's gone to Atlanta, one of the names
I was going to mention. Yes.
Now that he's gone to Atlanta, I'm in on her. I think top 5 might be reaching just a touch. I hesitate to say this name, but I'm going to say it anyway. What do we think about Jared Cook? Because he just sort of hangs around, and then he'll have 1 or 2 like really huge games. And look, he's not in a bad situation there in New Orleans. I mean, I know he's an older player, definitely on the backside of his career, but he's in a good situation where he can get a lot of targets there in New Orleans.
Yeah, he is. I'm always. And, Jared Cook has been a very good fantasy tight end for the last 2 seasons. Sort of in the second half of last season, he was tremendous. And then in that year with the Raiders, with Derek Carr throwing him the ball so much. So I don't know about top 5, though. Maybe I'm just scarred from years of liking him in Tennessee and St. Louis, and he freaking burned me.
That's fair.
That's possible.
That's fair.
But that would be a tough one for me. Like, you mentioned Hayden Hurst. I really like him. You've got nearly 100 available targets with Austin Hooper now in Cleveland. So Atlanta's going to throw the football to the tight ends, Tony Gonzalez and Hooper. The offense is conducive. The tight ends putting up some pretty good numbers. But Mike Gesicki is another guy.
Yeah.
I don't know about top 5. I don't know about top 5, but Mike Gesicki, I mean, that dude threw the ball over his house, ran through the garage, caught the pass, and then took it to the house, which in this case was his neighbor's driveway for the score. And nobody ran more routes out of the slot at the tight end position than Gesicki did last season. So, like, the opportunities are going to be there. He was always utilized down in the red zone. He was, I think, 6th or 7th in terms of routes run in the red zone among tight ends. There's some upside there too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of upside there. I mean, he's the guy that as you saw the year go along, he was running more and more routes per game too as the season went on. So they were expanding his role within the offense. And look, they got Chan Gailey there now, and he does not mind throwing the football around. I know he tends to put a lot of wide receivers on the field, but maybe when you got a talented big tight end like Gesicki, maybe you start to involve him a little bit more in that offense.
Chan Gailey, former head coach of my
former
Cowboys.
Cowboy head coach. That's right.
That's right.
So again, I always say this. I always preface this by saying I know that everybody gets talked about at this point in the off season, but is there a guy that maybe isn't being talked about enough, has sort of slid under the radar, if that's possible at this point?
So I feel like Hayden Hurst, that there's people are catching on to him. I feel like Blake Jarwin is a name that I like because,
right.
I mean, let's be honest. Witten, was a top 11 tight end last year.
Wild, which is
and Blake Jarwin Blake Jarwin's he's a talented guy. They gave him a pretty decent contract, $24 million. So Jonnu Smith in Tennessee with Delaney Walker now no longer in the mix. I mean, Jonnu Smith last year, he showed some flashes that he could do some things. Ian Thomas in Carolina with Greg Olsen now in Seattle. Chris Herndon. And I remember like Ryan Griffin sort of came on last year and was actually useful before he got hurt. But Chris Herndon, his stock had started to rise a little bit, Marcus, and then he got injured, and then everything kind of like fell apart. But if he's healthy, he has a rapport with Sam Darnold. And then there's that guy in Green Bay as the deep sleeper,
Jay Sternberger.
Yeah. I mean, right?
No,
okay, you're not in it. I get it. But like, I mean, somebody's got to bring in snaps in Green Bay at the tight end position, and Jimmy Graham's in Chicago for $9 million or whatever it is. So Sternberger, I mean, I think he's worth like a late flyer, don't you?
I think he's definitely worth a late flyer. I feel like, and maybe this is part of Packer Nation, especially on Twitter. I feel like every year there's a guy or two that Packers fans like really kind of grab hold to emotionally and try to convince us that this is the guy. Like for years it was Jeff Janis, right? Remember all those years Jeff Janis was going to be the big thing, and that never really happened. I think he caught one of the Hail Marys that Aaron Rodgers threw.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I think he caught a Hail Mary touchdown once. So Jeff Janis was one. I think Jay Sternberger is probably the next one that I'm like, I can't quite jump on. I think the thing that you mentioned, the other thing, you mentioned Chris Herndon. Have the Jets ever had a tight end? Like ever?
Well, they've had a lot of tight ends. They just haven't been.
Have they ever had one that's actually relevant for fans?
I feel like the last one, God, maybe it might be like Chase Amaro. Remember him? Like he was drafted and people were relevant. Justin Keller is another guy, right? He played for the Jets too.
Yeah.
But he didn't really do anything. Hell, I used to do a radio show in South Florida way back when I worked for CBS Sportsline with Johnny Mitchell.
Oh yeah,
Johnny Mitchell.
I remember Johnny Mitchell.
I think he was a first round pick out of like Nebraska or one of those schools. Nebraska. I think it might have been Nebraska. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, he was like highly touted and really didn't sort of do much in the NFL. But yeah, the Jets and the Cardinals, their fantasy tight ends have been an absolute barren wasteland forever.
Yeah.
Like I think Freddie Jones was like the last decent tight end that came out of Arizona. Remember Freddie Jones? He played for the San Diego Chargers, and then he ended up in Arizona for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Johnny Mitchell, you were correct. Went to Nebraska.
Okay.
But yeah, the Jets, it feels like they have punted on tight end, and the Cardinals have punted on tight end pretty much the better part of my lifetime.
Yes.
I will say that a lot of the names you mentioned too, and I like, guys like Blake Jarwin, I'm definitely in on. We'll see what happens. If Eric Ebron can sort of rekindle that magic from a couple of seasons ago now that he's in Pittsburgh. But the upside for a lot of these guys is you don't actually have to spend draft capital on some of these guys. I mean, I feel like a lot of these guys may be out there when the draft is over that you can just grab off the waiver wire and plug in if necessary. Or if you do have to draft them, you're literally talking tail end of the draft. So there's a lot of upside here for some of these guys without a lot of the risk that you would take in trying to have to acquire, what would be more of a valuable piece to put on your roster. So on the flip side, go ahead.
No, and I would say too that, I mean, every year there's a couple of tight ends that sort of slip under the radar and get drafted late and just bust out. Like Mark Andrews didn't slip under the radar. I think we were all on him, but he didn't cost you a lot of draft capital last year, right? I mean, so that it always happens every single year. It's just sort of picking out which guys are going to be in that category in 2020.
Right. I feel like we do have a generally good handle on drafting tight ends and their draft value, but are there guys that you're seeing right now that maybe are going earlier than you would have expected?
So I still am not like, I see Gronkowski going a little bit wrong. I'm like, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
He's Rob Gronkowski. I understand. He didn't play football last year. And, he's got two other guys in that offense that at that position that can do some things. So Austin Hooper's another one where I really liked him last year, but I mean, a lot of mouths to feed in Cleveland. And so with Higbee, he's one of the hardest guys for me to like project because are the Rams going to go back to running predominantly in 11 without Brandon Cooks? I mean, I think they're heading more towards doing more of the 12 formation. So that would be a good thing for Tyler Higbee, maybe not a great thing for Cooper Kupp, but like Higbee, people see what he did at the end of last season and they're just like drooling it. It's just like, wow, this guy's amazing. I feel like you need to tap the brakes a little bit on him. This dude was averaging over 20 fantasy points a game for like a 4 or 5 game stretch. That doesn't happen.
It's unfathomable. I
mean, Kelsey and Kittle were the two top guys last year and they were averaging right around 15.
Right.
So what sort of dramatic drop in terms of the numbers will Higbee experience? People are all about what have you done for me lately, and sort of, when a guy comes out and helps you win a fantasy football league, which Higbee, I'm sure, certainly did to a lot of people, they want to grab onto that guy the following season, and I feel like maybe he's going a little bit too high as well.
Yeah, it's interesting with Rob Gronkowski. This will be the first time we've seen him play professional football as a 30-year-old. He just turned 31 2 weeks ago. Obviously, he sat out all of last year, which would have been his age 30 season. We have not seen him play at the age of 30. I know that 30 years old is not the death knell for tight ends that it used to be for running backs, although I feel like for running backs now that number's dropped to like 27 or something like that, 27, 28. But, time marches on, and how is it going to impact Gronk? We don't know. We're going to find that out for the first time when we finally see him step on field. And
the last time we saw Gronkowski, he was not a great fantasy tight end.
He was not.
He had 47 catches. He had 682 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. I mean, he wasn't great at all. So hell, Father Time comes for us all, unless you're Frank Gore.
Right.
So that's another part of the reason why Gronkowski's ADP. I guess it's fair because of who he is. I don't know that he's going to produce the numbers that you're hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the thing with it right there. So you kind of got into it a little bit with the guys that are hardest to project. You mentioned Tyler Higbee being one of them. I would think that the Buccaneers kind of as a whole, I think, slot into that for me, right? Because Gronk seems to be the frontline guy, right? You don't bring in a guy like Rob Gronkowski, especially to appease your big-time free agent signing veteran quarterback and not want to use him as much as possible. But again, he's been out of football for a year. He's 31 years old. You've got a young guy in O.J. Howard there. You've got a guy in Cameron Brate who has been a very steady presence for you over the last few years. And how exactly these guys share the available snaps and whatever targets are available, that seems sort of murky to me right now. I can't really figure that one out. That one is what I've been trying to wrap my head around, and I don't have an answer right now.
Yeah. Yep. We have a few of those situations, like in Cleveland as well, where you've got a lot of talent there, and who's going to be commanding the most talent. And at the end of the day, it's going to be who's getting open, because Baker Mayfield, he's going to be throwing to the guys that are open. Hopefully he's going to have more time to actually like go through his progressions and make good, accurate throws, because the offensive line seemingly gotten much better in the offseason with the addition of Jack Conklin and through the draft as well. So a lot of it also depends on the quarterbacks. But like, I mentioned in LA, are they going to be running more 12? Are they going to go back to running 11? They brought in Van Jefferson. A lot of things that we need to sort of watch, especially during the preseason, assuming we do have a preseason, which I think we will, to see sort of, which way these teams are leaning on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, that is going to be the biggest, it's with the Rams, it's so hard, especially because, the last couple of years, Sean McVay is not putting his starters on the field at all, which sort of makes it kind of hard to figure. Which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Matt Nagy says he is going to play his starters in the preseason. And I don't know if this has to do with not having, a normal mini camp schedule or what have you, but he says he regrets not playing his starters last year. So he's going to play them in the preseason. I know for the players, from their standpoint, it's not great. For us, who are just greedy information hounds, like that's awesome, because we want to see how these guys look, how many snaps they're getting. We want to just get a sense of how they're working together. So I guess kudos to Matt Nagy for that.
How much are they going to play, though? I mean, like, let's be honest.
That's true. That's fair. So maybe they play a quarter, and then they sit down, they shut it down for the rest of the day. Yep. Is there a tight end that you are most looking to target in 2020?
So my strategy is almost always the same, and you know what it is, right? Like, so, once I get into that 6, 7, 8 sort of area, that's when I'm looking to see where I'm going to draft my tight end. And typically if a really good quarterback drops to me, maybe I'll go there, but typically I don't do that. So like in my drafts, I've been getting a bunch of Hunter Henry. I've been getting a bunch of Evan Ingram. I've been getting a bunch of Higbee as well. But in terms of guys that I'm targeting based on potentially unearthing that late round gem, Gesicki and Hurst are the two guys. If I want to go a little bit deeper, you could look at Noah Fant in Denver, although with the additions they made through the draft, that concerns me a little bit. And then going a little bit deeper, as I talked about, Ian Thomas, Chris Herndon as well.
Yeah, I would say that the three guys that I have been most on have been Fant, Gesicki, and Hurst, which, coincidentally on Fantasy Football Calculator, their ADPs line up one right after the other.
That's right.
So that sort of works out. But those are the guys that I really have had my eye on this year. But I am willing to sort of be flexible. I do know the odds of me getting Travis Kelce or George Kittle are probably slim to none, just because I don't.
Exactly.
I understand the value of getting those guys, because, as you mentioned, they seem to be the two locks, barring injury, to remain in the top 2 or 3 spots at the tight end position this year. I just feel like I want to go somewhere else with my draft at the time those guys are coming off the board. So I will probably never have either one of those guys on my team.
What are you thinking about Hockenson, though? Because Hockenson was like the big guy last year coming out of college, out of Iowa. People were comparing him to Gronkowski. And, tight end, typically in the first season, they struggle. Even some of the greats did nothing as rookies.
Right.
And I feel like Hockenson's being somewhat overlooked because of what he didn't do as a rookie. Right now, I have him ranked 14th, so he's a tight end 2 in that offense, assuming Matthew Stafford can play. By the way, did you see Stafford's house?
No, I didn't
Holy
see.
God. I mean, I don't know, not to get off topic here, but his house is for sale.
Right.
Holy geez Louise, that thing is sick. Like, he's got his dining room has a glass floor, and underneath it is like a wine cellar. Like, go and Google it.
I'm Googling this right now.
There's real estate websites that have like it's bananas. Anyways, what do you feel like with Hockenson, though? Because you think he's going to take the next step, or is it going to take another year? Because clearly he's got the talent, and if Stafford's back under center, he could end up being the third guy in terms of targets in that offense.
Yeah, I still feel like his ceiling, I mean, like 10, somewhere at the 8 to 10 range overall is maybe his ceiling this year. And I just think because this offense isn't what it used to be. This isn't the offense. Even a couple years ago when Stafford was healthy, they're not having him stand back there and throw the ball 600, 650 times. Like when he was setting, passing attempt records year after year after year, this offense just isn't that anymore. And so the volume is going to make it hard, especially when you have a lot of targets already going toward Kenny Golladay, going toward Marvin Jones, who we talked about earlier in the week, and what what he offers in that offense. The fact that they still have to figure out how to work in their 2 running backs that they've got, and Hawkinson will get in there. He'll get his opportunities, but I just don't expect him to come out and be a target monster this year in that passing game. And so I think, if he gets somewhere in 8 to 10, I think then he had a very, very good year, probably a little bit above what I would expect from him. But I think you said you have him at 14. I feel like that's reasonable. I think the more logical finish for him is somewhere around maybe 12, 13, something like that anyway. So that's sort of my thought. I guess that makes him a tight end too, basically.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Last thing, which guy or which tight end do you have a hot take about, or what is your tight end hot take for this year?
I think Mike Gesicki and Hayden Hurst are both going to end up being top 10 tight ends.
Okay.
I really do. I really do. Gesicki entering his 3rd year, and Hayden Hurst, who has been a bust for all intents and purposes based on where he was drafted in the 1st round by the Ravens. I believe it was 2018. I feel like these guys are in really good positions to succeed. Really, really good positions to succeed in 2020. The Dolphins will be better. Hell, they could contend for the AFC East. That's not a crazy take considering what the Patriots have sort of become. And Hayden Hurst, listen, man, it's never been about the guy's talent. The Ravens had about 700 tight ends on their roster the last couple of seasons, and he ended up being the guy that was the odd man out when Mark Andrews came in and sort of became the number 1 option. Sometimes a guy needs a change of scenery. He's been driving up to Atlanta to catch passes with Matt Ryan during this crazy COVID offseason. I really think he could end up being a very valuable asset.
So my hot take is we're sort of overlooking Jonnu Smith right now. And I think he could end up cracking the top 10 in terms of fantasy tight ends this year, because they are still looking for other guys to throw the football to in that offense. And we all love A.J. Brown, and I think the sky is the limit for him in that offense. But again, we are also asking for that to happen. You need Ryan Tannehill to be incredibly efficient, especially going downfield like he was last year. Yes, there may be more volume for A.J. Brown, but that also means potentially more volume for Jonnu Smith. And look, to be a top 10 tight end, you don't have to have a gigantic season, right? So for Smith, it could be a situation where he has 650 yards, he gets you 5 or 6 touchdowns, and that might be good enough to kind of crack the top 10, or at least knock on the door of the top 10. And so I think when you're talking about tight ends, especially guys late in drafts, guys that you can get off the waiver wire, don't sleep on Jonnu Smith. If you decide to wait on the position, I think that's an option for you down there in
I like that take.
Yep. Yeah. So so Jonnu Smith, especially now, look, there's no more Delaney Walker in Tennessee, so there's got to be somebody to kind of pick up the flag and run with it.
Yeah, you think about it. There's Delaney Walker's still a free agent. Jordan Reed is still a free agent.
Yep.
I don't know if somebody wants to take a chance on some of those guys, but there's some good veteran tight ends out there.
Man, and I'll tell you what, and you've mentioned this before too. I mean, with not being able to get in front of teams personally, with not being able to get physicals and get checked out, that has gone a long way toward, I think, hurting some of these guys. I mean,
look at Cam, dude.
I say Cam Newton is still a free agent. We're still waiting.
Cam is literally posting videos online to prove to teams that he's okay. It's almost like he's on a dating website and he's trying to post his best pictures so he can get a potential suitor. Yeah. That's what it is right now. That's all that these guys can do.
Yeah, no, you're right. And right now, I think a lot of GMs have been swiping left.
That's right.
That
was a good one, man. That was good.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Which, I'm going to go Costanza. Like, this is where we leave now.